Hi there. I am Brian from the Lincolnwood Library, and thanks for joining us today for our third episode of our Technology for Child Caregivers series. We're going to focus today on digital citizenship. And we, in this entire series, are trying to provide advice to help families thrive in our digital world. So, again, about this series, we are excited to help anybody watching this, especially those who live in Lincolnwood, with media and information and technology, specifically to help you thoughtfully use technology to get the fullest of it and not to let technology take advantage of you. So each episode in the series takes one topic and goes in depth about it today. So today, again, we're covering digital citizenship. So we'll do just a little more introduction and then we'll get into what is digital citizenship, and we'll talk about professionalism and work and things to ignore in the digital realm, and then summarize. I'm Brian, and I'm joined today by Kevin. Kevin hosted our previous episode on selecting media, and Anne was our first host in setting expectations.
So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Kevin, and my role here is the program and content librarian. So I do a lot with pretty much all of our different programs, as well as promotions and some social media and things like that. And previously, I've worked in a lot of different facets of being a librarian, pretty much everywhere from early literacy through mainly high school age kids, but including adults. And a lot of that has centered on use of technology, especially with some of the older kids. And I've been a teen librarian, and that's a huge topic, in addition to just talking with patrons on a daily basis at the reference desk about technology issues or just advice on how to best use technology. And then personally, I have a 2-year-old daughter and am married to a high school English teacher. So obviously she deals a lot with technology, and even at the age of 2, we have a lot of conversations as parents around technology, since it's so immersive, even more than when we were growing up. So it's definitely a big part of my professional and personal life.
I am one of the adult services librarians at the Lincolnwood Library, and I am a fairly new parent as of 2020. My daughter is about 11 months old, and I do technology training. I'm in charge of the library's technology events, and I'm excited to help people to get technology working for them. All right, so first we'll go into what exactly is digital citizenship, how it impacts us, and how could bad digital citizenship impact anyone.
And I can start off by just talking about kind of the idea of what is digital citizenship. And really, it comes down to that the internet isn't exactly this kind of other world or separate place, but what goes on in the internet is real, and it does have real impact and consequences. And so it's important when we talk about digital citizenship to learn, kind of play our parts well online as well as offline. And because it is a shared internet, and we have to kind of collectively take care of it together, and just how to use technology responsibly and appropriately, and obviously carefully, because there are real world consequences for it. And especially for kids, they're born and raised with a new level of technology and are kind of immersed in the internet and different kind of devices and apps, etc. And it impacts their lives in a very real way and impacts their development from a really early age. And it's important to learn how to use it appropriately. And so are going to go through a couple of different things, kind of more specifically And the first one is consent. So that basically, just to define that, is just to ask before posting or sharing anything. And then if you're unsure with what someone wants, whether they want it posted to spread further, then just don't reshare until you have that kind of express permission. Same thing with photographs or videos or any kind of recording or permanent marking. And it doesn't really matter where you post it, that consent is still going to be really important, because once it's on the internet, it doesn't exactly just go away. And obviously that's important, especially when you're dealing with kids and with minors. The main thing is just communication is key with the caregivers as well as the children. And it's important, even if a child is a minor and can't exactly give consent, that you're talking with their caregiver, but also just explaining to a child, why you're taking photos, what it's going to be used for, and that's just going to help them understand how to use the internet more responsibly and what you're doing, so that they're not confused or nervous about something. At the library, we have, in our youth department, we have kind of consent forms if we use something on social media, and that's, especially important when you're dealing with someone under the age of 18, that you communicate with them and their caregivers.
Okay, so next I'm going to talk about a tech term. We try to avoid two technical terms, but doxing and information privacy. So doxing is internet slang for kind of finding a whole bunch of information for someone, whether it's private information or whether it is kind of public information somehow that got out there, information that kind of personally identifies them, and combining a whole bunch of it together in a way that it can then become dangerous to that person. So, unfortunately, sometimes people who do not practice good digital citizenship do this. If they're mad at a journalist or a celebrity or someone in their community, they will go around and use the myriad sources online to put together kind of a dossier almost about somebody with so much information that it could really be used very negatively against them. So, in terms of information privacy, it's best to try to keep personally identifiable information like addresses, your full name, phone number, images of your house, really anything that can be tied to you and is usable in ways that can threaten you. It's good to keep that as private as possible. If you come across doxing, you should report it to the owner of the website where it is being posted. It probably violates a rule. And if you're actually the minor, you will obviously want to report it to a parent or a caregiver. So if you're doing this doxing, don't. If you are on the other side, try to limit the spread of your personal information.
All right. And then the other term that we'll talk about is rating. And basically, online rating is basically organizing a group together to quickly achieve a short-term goal. Like in a video game, you think about destroying an enemy faction, or outside of that, like disrupting a social forum or something along those lines. So obviously rating is okay in games where that's kind of expected if you're doing like playing like World of Warcraft or something. But in other contexts, it's really not okay, and it can kind of seem fun or harmless, or kind of it can seem like just a short-term issue. But especially if you're kind of just disrupting something really aggressively and using something like submitting flashing lights or animations, that can actually cause real health concerns to someone with epilepsy. And it kind of just goes back to this idea that there are real consequences and that those consequences can be long-term and not just short-term. So rating can happen really quickly and can be really disruptive and then it's over. But those things can have long-term consequences. And especially developmentally, children may not understand that kind of long-term versus short-term benefits or issues. And literally because their brains haven't progressed far enough. And so that's why it's important to kind of understand these terms and to put them into action in a positive way so that you can teach kids about the consequences and so that it doesn't happen.
Okay, so our first example here is a actually legitimate time when someone could go raiding. Fortnite is a very popular game, and the whole point is to beat the enemies, and your combatants in the shared online video game field are expecting that. So raiding in Fortnite is okay. But Kevin mentioned this example earlier. Years ago, there was an organized raid on an epilepsy forum online. So this is a space that people would assume is safe for them. It was a whole group of people collaborating and talking on that forum, and they called them hackers back then. I'm not sure there's a better name or not, but people who were not being good digital citizens put a whole bunch of flashing GIFs into that forum, submitted them as comments. And that is not what we want to be doing. I think most of us either know or through proper parenting and uh, training by caregivers can learn kind of the right context for different websites and know what is appropriate. And flashing images are not appropriate on an epilepsy forum. So that was a massive and unfortunately very dangerous raid.
All right. So I think in general, just to kind of sum up these three terms that we've talked about is just the golden rule still applies digitally. So to treat others as you would want them to treat you, be kind and positive, all of these kind of simple things, but are really important in the internet and digital space because it is a newer space. And I think, sometimes there's a lot of experimenting and those kind of new spaces, but that golden rule still applies, and to just kind of think about your actions and kind of compare them to your non-technology life and to other parts of your life. And would you still want to do that in another part of your life? If so, or if not, would you still want to do it digitally? And then just to think about the long-term benefits of that, especially with how long things have lasted, and you've seen probably examples in the news or in pop culture of things coming up from people's pasts that they don't want resurfaced, even if it's 10, 15 years in the future. Things are really hard to delete, even if you seem like it's going to go away in a couple of hours or a day. Digital footprints are really long, and those can have real long-term consequences.
All right, so this may not be a picture that you're familiar with, but a lot of people are. This is Barbara Streisand's house. And Barbara Streisand has an internet kind of term named after her, the Streisand effect. If you kind of draw attention to information, other people are going to want to find it. So her house was photographed as part of a survey of coastal erosion, and she sued to try to get it removed from that scientific website. Only 3 or 4 or 5 people had seen it before her lawsuit. Now we are looking at it. So it's best to try to remove anything really quietly by the simplest means possible. Otherwise, you may draw attention to something that really you are trying to remove. But it's also important to try, again, just to limit what is being posted because it is really difficult to remove things online. You can make copies very easily. And as the saying goes, the internet tends to route around censorship. So if it's out there, it is likely to stay out there. And the Streisand effect is this concept. Okay, so next we will talk about some digital citizenship aspects in terms of professionalism and work.
All right. And then to start out, we're just going to talk a little bit about just kind of an introduction and then just kind of copyrights and then citing sources and then a little bit more about professional writing. And basically it will just be boiled down to we want to make sure that we're respecting copyrights and understanding what our work is and then respecting what work is belongs to other people or other entities. And this just kind of goes back to the idea of understanding the digital space and having good media literacy so that you know how to use it correctly. And probably at some point in a child's life, they're going to need to know how to understand something that's digital. And then because of that, they really need to understand the context and be able to respond correctly. And along with professional writing, more than likely, whether you're in kind of an artistic space or business or STEM or something that doesn't have to do with writing or the internet, you'll probably have to do some kind of professional work in writing, whether it's through email or something much more elaborate. But most everyone is probably going to have to deal with that form in some form or another. So it's good to understand how to use it professionally so that you can succeed as well as just not offend anyone or make a mistake. So sources and citing, we kind of talked about that a little bit. The main thing is to kind of either cite your source or if you need to get permission to get kind of written formal permission or at least to link to the original content or mention the original content or just kind of formally and officially acknowledge what work is yours and then what work is someone else's. And that can be kind of difficult and there's a lot of examples that's kind of a gray area. So it's always important to ask, or if you're not sure, it's always just better to cite it anyways. And then it's much easier to just remove the citation if it's not needed than to kind of get involved with some kind of plagiarism case. And those, as we've mentioned before, all these things have real world applications, including jobs. If you work in social media or have to put out press releases or anything like that, what content you put out, it's really important to understand those things. It can have financial implications because people's work is their kind of property, and a lot of times there's money involved with that. And obviously you learn about plagiarism in school, but it can definitely have a lot of impacts outside of that. I was told a story in college of a professor who was finishing her PhD and had plagiarized a source in her final dissertation, and she had an elite job at a really, really well-known university, and basically the plagiarism was found out, and she was basically kicked out of school, lost her job. So there's real-world implications for things that seem innocuous but can have a lot of real-world implications. And then we'll go through kind of some practical examples of professionalism in internet use. So like screaming, quote unquote, so cap lock is screaming. It kind of just looks silly and unprofessional. Using emojis, it's probably okay in texting, but not in work documents. So it's always important to consider who you're sending it to and kind of what the context is in there. Tone, there's lots of examples that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, but it is important to consider your tone and remember that you're kind of when you're writing an email or sending a document, you can't really pick up on body language and tone of voice and things like that. So it's always better to be a little bit more formal than less formal. And then something that I learned from my wife, who I mentioned is a high school teacher, is about timing of sending an email, especially when you're upset. It's best to wait to send an email, or it's best to wait to post something and to just kind of let things cool down and consider that context. My wife has a rule of, not answering emails 24 hours after she sends out a major grade, so that if kids are really upset or if she's really upset about an email that gets sent in, she kind of just lets the grade settle in. People can kind of read it and understand it before she responds to any questions about it.
All right, so let's talk about some things to ignore as you are trying to be a good digital citizen online. So, in a lot of different forums, Facebook, Twitter, other places like Reddit, there are bots. Bots are kind of fake users that post content, and they can be manufactured to appear very real, but really they're not. Someone spent a lot of time and effort to put them together, automating the content that they're putting out, fake stuff. And most of the time, bots are up to something evil. So you probably want to ignore them. The problem, though, is that some of them are very convincing. Now, kind of on the flip side, are trolls. Trolls are usually more obviously actually human, although there could be bots that are doing trolling behavior. So trolls post things in various forums, again, the same types of forums like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, anywhere really. They're purposefully inflammatory, trying to get a rise out of people, trying to have a really contentious discussion. Sometimes people just do it for kind of the lulls, laughing at the people who get into the heated back and forth conversation. Other times, again, it's just kind of stirring up evil and dissension, and helping people to really be angry at each other and not get along. We really want to do the opposite of that, of course. We want to help people to get along online. And it's best to ignore these trolls. Just don't reply to their posts. Just move on. And finally, there are a lot of mistakes online. You want to try to be able to recognize them, whether it's bad grammar in a news article or a really weird picture that was accidentally posted. You might be able to help someone to say, hey, you accidentally posted that photo. You could tell them. But beyond telling them, you just want to probably ignore it. It was probably a mistake. It's hard to take down mistakes, so sometimes they may just persist, and that's okay. We can recognize that no one is perfect and people make mistakes. Now, if it is you that is making that mistake, you want to admit that you made it. If it is having some sort of impact on you, do whatever you can to fix it, whether it's deleting or posting a follow-up apology, and then we can all try to move on. But technology is always moving really rapidly. Everything is evolving and changing, and not everybody knows how to use everything at once. So unfortunately, there are a lot of mistakes that you can find on the internet. I've made some, and you can take things down. You can apologize, but if you're just viewing someone else's mistake, either let them know or just ignore it and move on. It's okay. Okay, so if you look down past the video here on this Reddit thread, this is one of the bots that kind of breaks the rule and proves the rule. It's the exception that proves the rule. So the Reddit NBA forum has bots that automatically post certain information in their discussion threads. And this is actually a nice bot. It's helpful. But the vast majority of cases, bots are doing things like posting cryptocurrency scams and trolling to make people more angry at each other. And bots are really not very good for us. So, this is one of those examples that really kind of proves the rule, the exception that proves the rule, and it is an automated bot.
All right. So this will just be kind of our summary and just kind of a few of the main points of being a good digital citizen overall, just kind of some good takeaways and just how to approach being a good digital citizen, especially if you're a parent and dealing with a younger person who definitely isn't aware or is just kind of learning about a lot of these things, which can be complicated and kind of an entire new space that they're existing in while they're developing and learning at the same time. So the first is kind of to have empathy for everyone else using the internet and technology, and kind of goes back to that golden rule. The second is to just try to understand how the technology involved works. The better that you can understand it, obviously the better you are going to be able to navigate it and use it correctly. Understand kind of your own user data and other user data and just kind of how that data is used once it's put out, and kind of just goes back to understanding how the technology works and then how you are using that technology. Don't let others take advantage of you. Ignorance isn't a good excuse. There are definitely ways to educate yourself and to be a good digital citizen. And then obviously you want to secure your technology so that others don't take advantage of you, which can happen really quickly, and help others do the same, especially with passwords. And then obviously with kids, there are parent controls and ways that you can help them at different ages, guide them, and kind of increase the security so that they're protected. And that also goes back to kind of making mistakes. If you have those passwords and that security up, likely those mistakes are not going to have as big of a impact as if you didn't have those things in place. And then the last is kind of digital wellness, so using technology for reasonable amounts of time. There is pretty much a lot of different things at different ages for how much time is appropriate. Obviously for newborns, through the first year and a half, even up through 2 years, really almost no dedicated screen time is recommended outside of like FaceTime or communication like that. And then obviously there are implications for development, for the health of your eyes and just kind of your own critical thinking and pretty much all the things like that.
All right, so we are going to practice being good digital citizens ourselves. We've got some sources and more resources for you. So down at the bottom, a couple really specific things we cited: doxing and the Streisand effect, and one article that we based some of our content today on. And resources: Common Sense Media has a really good digital citizenship curriculum that you can take a look at. We also have a lot of great books in our Lincolnwood Library parenting collection that you can check out at any time, focused on more than just the digital aspect, all aspects of parenting in that collection. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention local schools. Schools are using a lot of the technology, so in some respects, they wind up having to teach a lot of this as well. as students explore and use the ever-changing technology. It might be kind of a different point person at each school. It might be a science, technology, engineering, and math teacher, or some sort of technology trainer or coach. Or there might even be some sort of full committee. But they are using the technology and have to facilitate it to some degree. So thank you so much for listening, watching this class today. We have all sorts of ways that you can contact the library. You can give us a call, 847-677-5277, or you can reach out to our specific numbers for our different departments, the Adult Services Department and the Youth Department. You can also email us and see our YouTube page where we have archived classes like this. And we have all of our premium resources on our research and learning quick links page. But again, just to summarize, we all use technology. It's up to all of us to be good digital citizens. Kids have it especially hard because just as they're learning to be people in our world, they also have to learn technology.
In our youth department, we have programs and story times and more programs, even like in our book discussions and things like that. We kind of talk about literacy, digital literacy, and screen time, and those are also great resources and just talking to us and coming to our events and things like that, because digital literacy is kind of built into a lot of things that we do in all of our departments.
All right. So for Kevin and I'm Brian, and I just want to say thank you so much for watching our video, Technology for Child Caregivers, Digital Citizenship today. Thanks so much.